times where the headlines and the news are basically dominated by crisis and by challenges to our existence, we would like to shed light on the positive examples, on inspiring ideas, on people who really make a difference for our environment and also for biodiversity. This series is dedicated to the inspiring examples that show us that change is not only necessary but also possible. I'm really happy that this collaboration is taking place, and I would like to thank the Institute of Landscape Ecology and the Center for Integrated Biodiversity Research and Applied Ecology for this collaboration. Thanks. And especially I would like to thank Nadja Pernert and Sascha Buchholz for making this possible. I welcome our first speaker, Jon Taylor, today, who will be introduced by Nadja. And therefore I hand over the microphone to Nadja, and I thank you all for coming, and I wish us a wonderful evening.
Hi everyone. Yeah, a warm welcome from my side as well, from the side of the university. And I give back the thanks to Jan Ole that this could happen here in the beautiful planetarium in the museum. Yeah, it's I have a text, but I changed it because when I look into the faces, it's kind of, I'm giving a lecture at the university because I see so many familiar faces, and I would like to thank you for coming tonight. That's really great. Thank you very much. So, but before I introduce our speaker, Jon, I would like to ask you a question. So, who has ever felt depressed or sad about biodiversity loss or environmental change or climate change? Please raise your hand. Oh, wow, okay. That's a lot of people. And because many people are feeling this, we have a scientific term for this already. It's called ecological grief. And we as ecologists, we feel ecological grief, yeah, all day, so every day, because we are confronted with these topics every day. And even worse, we have to tell our students about it. Well, maybe we don't have to tell them, but we do, because I think, and we think, that it's important that you know all about it, what's going on, and that there are solutions to tackle these challenges. So we hope that they tackle the challenge when they leave university and start their own careers. Well, but as you imagine, it's all so hard teaching over years and always sharing the bad news. So I came up with the idea, maybe we could have an event where we share the good news. So this series invites people who share good news, who inspire us with their success in nature protection. And our first speaker, Jon, is the Director of Conservation Optimism at the University of Oxford. And he will talk about how important it is to stay positive, to communicate positively for successful nature protection, for successful conservation. And well, he describes himself as a conservation optimist, so I hope he will share some of his optimism with us tonight. So, welcome to the stage. The floor is all yours. Jon.
You got that. Hopefully this one's going to work. Yep, it sounds like it's working. Thank you all for coming. And thank you to SEBRA and thank you to the museum for inviting me. I didn't realize this was the first in this series of lectures, so it's a great honor to be starting you off. I hope we start off well. If not, that will be my fault. Whenever I come, that is still working. Whenever I come across the channel, I have to start off any talk with a series of apologies. The first one is because I don't speak German. I used to work for the European Commission, and when they were describing people's linguistic ability, they would divide it up into people who were multilingual, spoke many languages, people who were bilingual, who could work at least well in at least 2 languages, and British. Guess where I fit. I also, while I'm apologising for stuff, Brexit, Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer, the last 2 Women's European Football Cups, which we won, yes. Notice I avoid the Men's Cup because I have to go back a long way before we beat the German team on that one. Right, let's get started. Who am I? What am I doing here? A long time ago, hundreds of years ago, I was young and had hair and worked on big projects for people like the World Bank in Africa and in Asia. That is Komodo, where the dragons live. I meant to say when I was apologizing for the lack of German, I will try and speak slowly and clearly. I'm sure most of you are pretty confident in English, but some of you, you're all working in a second language. If you don't understand what I'm saying, if I start going too fast, you're very welcome to throw things at me. If they're soft, that's better, but throw what you want and I'll slow down. I spent a long time looking after the LIFE program. That's a big European Union funded program for environmental projects within Europe. I looked after all the projects in UK and Ireland, but I was part of the team that looked after the whole of Europe. So I've seen a lot of European conservation projects. What did I do then? I've worked for WWF on climate change for 5 years. That's fun. I worked for ZSL. We were just talking about tiger footprints. That was out in eastern Russia. That was the beach right next to our camp. Those footprints were not there the night before. And that was really early in the morning. So you can see who's been wandering past the camp. Those are tiger footprints. I was managing director of Save the Rhino for 5 years until recently. And for the last 18 months, I work at the university in Oxford, which is a small town in England. And I'm the director of Conservation Optimism, which is an initiative that was set up by the university. It's also a charity. So I'm the director of a small charity, and I work at the University of Oxford. They actually pay my wages. This is an amazing venue, so I'm going to come off this stage after a bit and start pacing around, particularly as a lot of you are students, and we can make sure you're still awake. There is a thing called naive optimism, and it just says, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. There isn't really a problem. It'll get better. It'll be okay. Don't you worry. It's nice to think like that, but a lot of you guys are scientists or geographers or other academically minded people of one type or another. It might make you feel good for 5 minutes, but then you'll come out of here thinking, hang on a minute. I just heard the head of the United Nations say that we'd missed the 1.5 degree temperature target that was set in Paris 10 years ago. I keep hearing really bad news. Jamaica's just had the biggest hurricane it's ever seen passing over it, and it's now laying waste to Haiti. That guy who turned up at the museum and told us it was all going to be okay, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. That's naive optimism. It's, yeah, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. It's a child's optimism, and it doesn't really work. It doesn't bear scrutiny. It doesn't stand up to evidence. So we're not going to waste our time with naive optimism. We're going to get on with the serious stuff. And for the serious stuff, we really need to get into what the problem is. So for the first part of this talk, I'm not going to tell you anything optimistic. We're going to take a good look at the problem, we're going to stare it straight in the face, and we're going to deal with it. And then we're going to go on to talk a little bit about what really needs to happen and what we're learning from this process in order to make that problem better. But then we will get on to some real causes of optimism that will, I hope, stand up to the evidence and bear some scrutiny. And you can take them out of here at the end of the evening, and even when you hear the bad news from the UN and the bad news about Jamaica, you can think, yeah, but there's still this other stuff. There's some real hope. So we're going to go through the tough stuff, and then we're going to come out the other end, hopefully with something real. Ah, yes, humans. Let's take a quick think about humans. For a long time, this is such a good venue, I'm going to start pacing, because this is too wonderful to stand up there all the time. So, humans. For a long time, they were just hanging around the planet. There weren't that many of them. They were throwing sticks at each other. Quite a lot of the time, they just lived peaceful lives and learned to grow crops and things, and they didn't really disturb the situation very much. Occasionally, one civilization or another would grow up, and they would develop wonderful skills, and they would build beautiful things. But the communication around the world wasn't good enough for whatever they did to go global. So a big civilization would come up, they would influence what was going on in their part of the world for a bit, and then they would slip quietly away. Keep an eye on the time. But then, in a small northern country that I know well, a small northern island just north of here, there was an industrial revolution. And it was just at a time when global communications had got big enough that that kind of thing could go global. And it was just coincidence. It just happened at the right time when there were enough international networks for the thing to spread out around the world. And so things happened. That happened. That's the human population of the planet, as far as we can tell, back to about 10,000 BC. And you can see that for the longest time, humans, there weren't that many of us. There weren't enough of us, and we weren't doing enough bad things to make much of a difference. In the last 200 years, really, and particularly in the last 30 or 40 years, the human population on this planet has spiked. It's gone up from, it was about 3.5 billion when I was born, it's 8.2 now. It will probably stabilize somewhere between 10 and 11 billion. So we've gone from less than 2 billion, probably up to 10.5 billion in the space of 200 years. That requires some adjustment. Put another way, the first billion people, it took us up to 1805, the year 1805, to get to 1 billion people. It took all of human history to produce that many people. The next billion only took 120 years. Uh-oh. The next billion only took 35. And since then, we've been producing 1 billion people pretty much every 12 years. It's slowing down, hopefully, a little bit now. But that makes you think. And of course, they've been industrializing at the same time. So this is not 8 billion people who lived like the people who used to throw sticks at each other occasionally. This is 8 billion people who have internal combustion engines, or many of them do. This is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this is going back nearly 800,000 years. We've got this data because of ice cores from the Antarctic, and you can see the cycle. It cycles between about 150 or a little bit more and about 280, 150, 280. It's called the Milankovitch cycle. It's due to an eccentricity in the Earth's orbit. But that cycle is perfectly natural. And then in the last less than 100 years, it's now well up above 400. The last time I looked, it was about 420. That was a few days ago. Carbon dioxide, of course, is a greenhouse gas. So is methane and other things. Where's the button? There we go. This is the Living Planet Index. This is a measure that they started in 1970. It's a measure of wildlife abundance. So this is numbers. So the 0 point is 1970, and then we look at decline in numbers since then. And it's gradually got bigger and bigger as more and more species are included. So the figures have been normalized for that. But the last report was issued in 2024, and the figure is that it's down 73%. So that's abundance, wildlife numbers of the populations that we're measuring, down 73% since 1970. I told you I'd cheer you up. We'll get to the good stuff. This is a different one. This is, let's come over to this one. This is biomass. This is mammal biomass. So this is the mass of mammals on the planet. And the main takeaway, so there's 100 squares, each square is 1%. Wild mammals make up 4% of the mammalian biomass on the planet, split pretty equally between land mammals and marine mammals. There's quite a lot of marine mammals, surprisingly. A big chunk is humans, an awful lot is our cattle and our pigs and our sheep and our buffaloes. There are more domestic buffaloes in the terms of biomass on the planet than all of the wild mammals put together. And that's buffaloes, it's not even pigs or cattle, which are the big ones. So, again, food for thought. This is from the UNFCCC. This is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This was from their famous report in 2018 that talked about keeping temperatures under 1.5 degrees. All of the headlines about net zero by 2050, reducing 30% by 2030, they all come from this report. Anything that limits us to 1.5 degrees needs rapid and far-reaching transitions in pretty much everything we do. Interestingly, one of the key statistics from that was that it needed greenhouse gas emissions needed to peak globally by 2025 at the latest, and then plummet after that, steeply down. It's nearly the end of 2025, and we don't see any sign of that happening. This is IPBES. It's like the IPCC, but it's for biodiversity and ecosystem services. Hands up if you've heard the term ecosystem services. Excellent, some people are awake. Excellent. IPBES is not the intergovernmental panel, it's the intergovernmental, I can't even remember what they are, advisory panel. That's wrong, never mind. But they said pretty much the same thing. Sustainable global future needs transformative change, rapid and far-reaching actions of a type never before attempted. This led up to the new framework, Biodiversity Framework Convention, which is where the 30 by 30, we need to protect 30% of the land, 30% of the seas by 2030. So 30 by 30 targets come from. The current target in the UK for land that's adequately protected for biodiversity is 3%. So only 27% to go in the next 5 years. 30 by 30, yeah, the UNFCCC climate change people looked at that and said, that would be great, make it 50% by 2030. But that's difficult to get there. A few news headlines, these are old ones. That was when the 1.5 degrees report came out. Talking about, there was somebody from Greenpeace said, scientists want to say, act now, you idiots. This is important, we'll come back to this. Think of the language. Act now, you idiots. But they need to say that with facts and numbers. And they have. That was Greenpeace talking. That was 2018 when the 1.5 degrees report came out. This is this year. The LA fires in January. This is this summer. I tried to get something with Germany in there. But yes, we're seeing more and more extremes of weather. We know this. Last one, I think, and then I'll stop laying it on for you. I used to run Save the Rhino International, or I used to be MD of Save the Rhino International, so I know a little bit about rhinos. The northern white rhino is a subspecies. It's not a species, so it's a subspecies, but there are two subspecies of white rhino. The northern one was getting more and more endangered. There were some in zoos, so they moved them all back to Kenya in the end, so they'd all be in one place and back in their native habitat, and maybe they would breed. They did not terribly well. The last male, who was called Sudan, died in 2018. There are no more male rhinos. There are two females left. They both have reproductive problems. Some amazing people are doing some great work to try and capture the genetic material, keep them alive by artificial means. But that was the last of the male northern white rhinos. That was 2018. The vaquita, the little cow, is a small porpoise who lives in the Gulf of California, the Sea of Cortez. It's a wonderful little creature. The latest report from last year says that there are probably fewer than 10 left. That's not a viable population, not by any stretch. So we're probably going to lose the vaquita, which will break my heart, but there you go. Yeah. If you're thinking that about now, I don't blame you. There are real problems. We have a real crisis. This challenge is probably bigger and more complicated than anything we as a species, as an organized society, have had to deal with. Let's be honest about that. And we can look at people and we can see how they act, and we can sometimes think, are those humans capable of fixing that problem? And on a bad day, we might think, no. What happens to us when we start having a good hard look at all this data that I've just dragged you through? This was from a senior conservationist in Canada last year. Some of the most common challenges we face are burnout, psychological safety, ecological grief, amongst both young and established conservation professionals. People who work on conservation all day are feeling this hard, which is why conservation optimism was set up originally, one of the reasons. How many people got Ray's album? Really? Nobody? I thought I was really cool having that album. Never mind. How many people know who Ray is? Okay, one or two. It's not me that's not cool, it's you guys. Okay. British singer, debut album came out 2 years ago, won lots and lots of awards. She's really good, go and buy the album. But she did a song called Environmental Anxiety. I mean, she's 25. These are some of the lyrics. I think the chorus says, what did we think was bound to happen? We poisoned the waterfalls and set fire to our rivers of hope. It's a really good album, even if it has got a song about environmental anxiety on it. Young people report more and more ecological grief, eco-anxiety. It becomes a major thing. So young audiences, as well as professional conservation audiences, are really important for conservation optimism. This is Christiana Figueras, who used to run UNFCCC, and is generally very big in the conservation world. It's a great quote, and I wish I'd said it, but I didn't. It's hers. But the sense of despair is understandable, but it robs us of our agency. It makes us vulnerable to mis and disinformation and prevents the radical collaboration we need. I love the idea of radical collaboration. We need people working together who probably have never worked together before. We need to be doing brave things, and a sense of despair holds us back. Doubt holds us back from taking bold action. Really good quote. Wish I'd said it. Drat. So this is conservation optimism. This is what we do. It's not going to be, my main talk is not going to be about us. It's going to be about the importance of what we're trying to do, and lots of other people are trying to do as well. But just so you know who we are, this is our elevator pitch. If we bump into somebody nice with a massive checkbook and he says, "What do you do?" This is what we say. So we support, we empower, and we enable conservationists around the world. We share hope, and we build capacity and community. Supporting and empowering is mostly about sharing stories of hope. Enabling is building community and getting people talking to each other and sharing skills and sharing lessons learned, that kind of thing. If you want the longer version, we had a big conference last year. Empowering, enabling, and embracing were the subtext from our conference. Let's move things around a bit. So we believe that a healthy, diverse, and resilient world is achievable. We know the challenge is huge, but we think it can be met. I have good reason for thinking that. I'm an old cynic. So if you can convince me, I hopefully convince you. We understand that the language of crisis and emergency has a role. We're going to come back to this language. Language is so important. Has a role in inspiring action. But for those wanting to act, it wears you down. Living in a world of crisis and emergency all the time, and that's your job. It wears you down. It's not empowering. We recognize there is a power of hope. Hope is really important for humans. Humans can do amazing things, but not if there's no hope. They'll give up. Most animals will give up. We're an international team working with a worldwide community to inspire a global effort. There are lots of people working to inspire a global effort. We're just one of them. But we've got an amazing team, and they look like that. And apart from 2 or 3 at the top, including me, who actually gets paid, all of these people are volunteers. And they're all around the world, and you don't have to remember them. There will not be a test afterwards. And there's even more of them. We have regional hubs where people are doing the things that we do globally, and they're taking them and putting them in their own region. And we're setting up more of them. Some of them we have teams. We've now got some countries where we've just got 1 or 2 people, but they're doing a fantastic piece of work. What do? We social media every week. Pardon me. We share 7 stories of hope every week out on social media. So one of our volunteers has to trawl through, find 7 stories from the last week and put it all together for you. But it's not that difficult. There's quite a lot of hope going on. How many people get nervous doing a presentation? I expected to see more hands there. I've been doing these for years. I flatter myself I'm not bad at them, and my mouth still goes dry as a bone. I promise you it does not get easier. Let's keep that there. Thank you. We do lots of social media stuff. We do blogs. We get inspiring people that either write about the great work that they're doing or sometimes their own personal story. So it can be a young person who's just done something amazing, or it can be some inspiring award-winning conservationist who's spent their 20, 30 years doing amazing conservation. But it's great to hear stories from people and from projects that are working or have some lessons learned to share and some bits of success that they can pass on to others. We do a short film festival every year. That's not because we decided that was the most impactful thing. It was because several years ago, one of the people working for us was brilliant at organising film festivals. And we started doing it, and it's got really popular. And we did it last weekend at the Natural History Museum in Oxford, which is more like a traditional natural history museum with lots of skeletons and things and doesn't have a brilliant planetarium. But it was really nice anyway. We videoed the whole thing, and it will be up on our website in 2 or 3 days. So do go and watch it. There's a little bit of people talking at either end, but the main bit of it is about an hour and a half of 20 brilliant short films, and they're really good. So do go and have a look at that. We can send you a copy if you want to use it for an event or something. It was really good. We do podcasts. There's a new series of podcasts coming out soon, just interviewing people. What else do we do? We've got a big network of organizations around the world, and we try and get them all working together and doing brilliant webinars and teaching each other. And that's great. And we sometimes produce tools. We've got a positive communication toolkit, which needs revising, but the original one's not bad. There are things for young conservationists. We work with people and make nice things. We've got our regional hubs where people are taking the global stuff and doing it in regional or nationally appropriate ways, or going for a particular audience. We've got an amazing team in Pakistan who are really focusing on young people, doing an amazing job, and they're all volunteers. We did a couple of summits. Conservation Optimism was originally set up just to do a summit in 2017, and it was so popular it carried on as an initiative, and then there was another one in 2019, and then there was a pandemic, you probably noticed. It may have interrupted your schooling a little bit. And we did another one finally last year. And people love them. This was the one last year, and I had a full head of hair last year until that summit, so it was a lot of work. So let's indulge ourselves for 90 seconds of what happened last year. Oh, and the music's not going to play, but never mind. Imagine some nice, gentle background music, like that. And some brilliant people turn up. That was a hip-hop didgeridoo session. I kid you not. It was so cool. That's some of the team. Okay. And there probably won't be one in 2026. There might be one in 2027. So that's us. And that's who I am. And that's looking at the problem and where we are. And I'm looking at the clock. Wherefore, if I'm probably mispronouncing it. It's an old word in English. It's not used very much anymore. I think it's still currently used in German. But for a strategist, and I do a lot of conservation strategy, it's one of the most important words we've got. In English, we tend to use why, but why are you doing this? For what purpose? I presume it means the same in German. Is probably the most important question we ask. Given that we've got a little bit of time and most of you are students, I did a mentoring thing at the European Conservation Science Conference last year, speed mentoring. Got all these people coming past. What are you doing? Oh, we're doing a PhD and the second year of our PhD. Bro, that's brilliant. Why are you doing that? Oh, nobody's ever asked us that before. Okay. Well, what is it that really inspires you about that subject? What do you want to do with it? Oh, never thought about that. So many people who've just gone through whatever's the easiest step and suddenly they're doing a PhD and nobody's ever asked them, where are you going? Don't do that. Think about what your plan is. Wherefore? For what purpose? Why are we doing this? Whether you're planning a project or your own career, why are we doing it? What's the purpose? I talked about language. We are talking to people in this language of crisis and emergency all the time. We use these words. Imagine you go out for a walk and you see that the river, there's been a lot of rain, the river is rising, the river is about to flood. You think that the flood is going to reach your house, it's going to reach your street. So you go running back to your street and you don't knock politely on your neighbor's door and try and quietly explain to them that there's a flood coming. You hammer on the door and you wave your arms and you get really excited because you're trying to get a particular reaction out of them. These are humans. We're geared up to react in a certain way. And if you see somebody knocking politely on the door, you're not going to react with that kind of fight or flight response. But if you see somebody going, oh my God, there's a flood coming, you probably will. Adrenaline cuts in, cortisol cuts in. Your body knows how to react. Hopefully you grab your family and your precious things and you head for higher ground and nobody gets hurt. And that's fine. We know how to react. If a tiger wanders into the middle of the village, we know how to react. If there's a flood coming, we know what to do, providing somebody yells at us. But we don't know what to do with global crisis. And yet people are still yelling at us because we still think that's going to work. There's a crisis. There's an emergency. We must change everything we do now. We don't know how to do that. And nobody feels that they've got the power. How many people in this room, no, that's just going to be no hands. How many people in this room don't think that they have the power to take on a huge global crisis? I'm really worried about the ones who are not putting their hands up. They're either super people or completely deluded. Yeah. And yet, if you can't fight it, what's the alternative? If it's fight or flight, the alternative is running away. This is a global crisis. Where are you going to go? You can't fight, you can't flee. So the alternative is often to freeze. And that's what people do. They don't feel that there's anything that they can do, so they don't do anything. And that's what we're doing. We're yelling at people, and we've been doing it for 10 or 15 years. Oh my God, there's a crisis, there's an emergency. And people, we're puzzled that people are not rushing home and dramatically changing their way of life. They don't think they can do this, and so they don't. They don't think there's anything they can do. The other thing we do as scientists, and not everybody in the room is a scientist, but some of us are guilty of this, is we work in facts and figures and information. So we go out and explain it to them with reports and facts and figures and new information. And we're really surprised when they don't react to that as well. I know I've explained climate change to you 36 times before, but with this new report and this new graph, I know that this time you're going to go rushing out of here, swap your 4x4 for a bicycle, insulate your home, and live completely differently from now on. And we're completely surprised when they walk out and get back in the 4x4, shake their heads and go home. That isn't how humans work. It's how scientists work. But it isn't how most humans work. We need to understand how humans work in order to help humans move to a more sustainable future. And this becomes interesting. There are people who have understood how humans work for a long time. Anybody who can get up and do a great speech, any great writer. How many of you have read Goethe? Please put some hands up. Yes, because he's one of the best. There's an Goethe's written some fantastic quotes, brilliant. But one of the ones I love the most, and it was just a little one, but this guy was writing 250 years ago, and one of his quotes is just, "There is nothing worse than aggressive stupidity." And I just think that's brilliant. That could have been written yesterday. That's just a wonderful quote. It's nice that the world hasn't changed that much in 250 years. Mind you, Shakespeare's even older, and he wrote some great ones too. Goethe. Okay, language is important. Let's carry on. What we used to do in the old days, and what we still do quite a lot today, is, I'm ignoring all the people over here. Let's go and stare at you for a bit. Hi. It's because you haven't got a screen behind you. We used to do conservation projects, and then we would communicate about them. Communicating is something you do about conservation, we think. And you maybe do it because you want to raise awareness of what you're doing. You often do it because you want to raise funds. So it's more difficult. It's separate from the conservation. But that's changing now. At least some of us are trying to change it. We no longer communicate about conservation. Now, in this part of the world, there's a lot of conservation projects going on. People are still looking after the ecosystems that are left. They're trying to rewild ecosystems that have been lost. But the main work, the main crisis in this country, in our whole continent, in this part of the world, is not just losing ecosystems. Our main conservation crisis is we're burning too much fossil fuel and we're over-consuming pretty much everything, particularly food, particularly meat-based food. So the biggest conservation impact that we can have globally is not restoring some German heathland or some British wetland or whatever. The biggest conservation impact we can have is changing human behavior, is changing how we live. That will help us and it will help everybody globally. So that's really important. So the biggest conservation challenge becomes changing human behavior. And so we're not just communicating about conservation anymore. We are communicating for conservation. Communication becomes the conservation tool, not just for supporting conservationists and giving them some real hope through a time of crisis, which we'll come back to, but also for actually getting human beings generally to understand what we're doing and maybe join in. Communication becomes really important. Let me share a little bit of what those older people who were great writers and great talkers knew, but combined with new understanding of how humans work, we can explain a little better and we can write down a little better than probably what people knew on gut instinct 1,000 years ago. We've got older models of how humans work. Do you know Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Have you seen this, younger persons in the audience? There's some nodding heads. It's an old model. It's 1950s. It's not a bad one. It doesn't work terribly well for individuals, but for large numbers of people, it works quite well. People will attend to their basic needs first, then they'll attend to their psychological needs, and being social creatures, that often means how we fit into society and how we interact with other people. And if all of those are sorted, then people will start thinking about the greater good and those kind of things. And if the times get hard and the pressure mounts, that pyramid can come down again quite quickly. Witness how many people will vote for political parties at the moment that says, forget everybody else, we're going to look after ourselves. Seems to be quite a popular viewpoint at the moment. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs and other models like this, the older models, are still pretty relevant, particularly when you're dealing with large groups. But there's new science that gets much more interesting. This is 21st century. This is social science. Any social scientists in the room? Very few. Oh, a couple of hands go up. Excellent. We could spend an entire hour on this, and let's not. This is fascinating stuff. This is Shalom Schwartz's work, and it's been tested by other people around the world, and it seems to hold pretty well. This is a map of universal human values. So this is not what kind of person am I. This is we all have these values. There's a 13th one, which is spirituality, that may or may not fit in there somewhere. But everybody seems to have these values. And they're set out like this because they interact, they work, they impact each other. So, for example, neighboring values, if you're talking about one, it tends to trigger the ones around it. Conversely, it's very difficult to be working with opposing values at the same time. That's not particularly social science. When you think about it, it's quite logical. The ones in the top left-hand corner are all about openness to change. In one way, it can be all about self-realization, self-direction. If you come down the bottom, it can get pretty hedonistic. But it's all openness to change and new experience. The bottom is all about not being closed, open to change, about wanting things to stay the way they are, tradition, security, conformity. We all have some of these values, but it's very difficult to be open to change and not open to change at the same time. The ones down the bottom here are all about self-fulfillment, whereas the ones in the top are about self-transcendence. So this is about me, 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 and this is about something greater than me. And again, it's very difficult to be thinking about both at the same time. How many people here care about conservation? How many people in here would like some more money? Who didn't put their hand up? We've all got these values, but some of them counteract, and that's important to think about. People's attitudes and people's reaction to facts and figures and new information tends to depend on their attitudes. And their attitudes lie on top of their underlying values. Understanding the values of who we're talking to and how those values can interact, and how we might want to take those people on a journey from one set of values to another, is really important in understanding the audience and who we're talking to. So this is using new social science to understand what some people knew instinctively probably quite a long time ago. Conservation optimism is trying to pick up people who are maybe thinking about their own security, look after number one first, pull up the drawbridge, the world's getting difficult, we must look after ourselves, and trying to take people on a journey to make them think that there is still an opportunity for self-direction, for universalism, for not giving up on those other values that are opposing. They're not going to entertain those values if they don't think there's any hope. And they'll come down here. But we're trying to pull them back up again. Anybody read Thinking Fast and Slow? If you have, yeah, good. If you haven't, go read it. It's one of the best books in the last 20 years. This is Daniel Kahneman's work. He's a Nobel laureate. This is the one book he wrote summing up a lifetime's work on how humans work. System 1 thinking is 95% of our time. It is fast. It is unconscious. This is human automatic mode, and it's brilliant. It keeps us alive. It does an amazing job of keeping us alive. Anybody who thinks that you spend most of your time in your conscious mind, no, you don't. It used to be, people like Carl Jung used to think that the conscious was the bit sitting on top of the pie. Even Mark Soames, when he wrote his book 25 years ago nearly, had come to the conclusion that the conscience is just a little observation thing out to one side. Most of what goes on in here is unconscious. And it's brilliant. It's a fantastic machine. But most of it we don't know about. System 2, probably 5% of our time. It's effortful, it's slow, it's logical, it's lazy. It wants to go automatic as quickly as possible. That's how humans work. Give them something difficult to think about and they'll find a way to reframe it so that they can put it into automatic mode as quickly as they can. It's indecisive as well. It will not make a decision. System 2 works in probabilities. It's probably that. It might be that. There's a small chance that it's that. System 1 will take it and go, yeah, we're going to assume it's that one. But System 2 on its own is indecisive. It's hard work. I won't ask, but if there's any neurodivergent people in the audience, usually there are differences in how System 1 works, which forces people more time in System 2, which is an interesting way of looking at the world, and has consequences. Given this, do we think that talking to people with facts and figures and intellectual information is going to have a big impact on them? Or do we think that talking to people with things that appeal to their subconscious, to their emotions, is going to have the bigger impact? That's a rhetorical question. Of course, it's the second one. You're talking to 95% of the brain rather than 5%. It's really important that we recognize who we are, how we operate. Don't put that up. How many people have got a scientific poster or a slide that looks like that somewhere? Yeah, don't put that up. That's even if people are trying to understand it, they're busy trying to understand, so they're not listening to you. But most of the time, people are just going to switch off. System 2 will give up with that. That was from the IPCC report. At least that one, which is from the Global Biodiversity Framework, has got pictures in. That starts appealing to the visual system. It starts appealing to the emotional. Little nature, nice nature. We can see that. That looks nice. We like that. It's getting better. It's still a graph. It still needs some intellectual interpretation, but at least it's pretty. And it speaks to the emotions as well as the System 2. Cogito ergo sum. We think, therefore we are. Oh no. Sentio ergo sum. We are feeling creatures. Therefore we are. How much of what you do at the end of the day, however sophisticated you are, you do the things that are going to make you feel good and you avoid the things that are going to make you feel bad. For one person, what's going to make you feel good is a big house and an Audi A6. For another person, it might be saving a species. But at the end of the day, we do the things that make us feel good and we avoid the things that make us feel bad, and everything else is just a matter of sophistication. If that makes you feel glum, just be more sophisticated. Still possible to be a good person. But these are the things we need to know to move people to where we need them to be, whether they're conservationists who need to be more hopeful, or whether they're human beings who need to really get rid of that Audi A6 and swap it for a bicycle. Job 1 is tell stories. Stories are not just another way of communicating. You'll hear so many workshops now on storytelling. It's so important. They're right, it is. Why? Because this is the way that the human brain understands the world. We understand the world through narratives, and then we go to sleep and we dream stories. It is the way that our brains work. Tell somebody a story, and it feeds right into their emotional connection with the world. We can make people feel like $1 million. We can break their hearts, or we can make them want to fight to the end with a good story. You're not going to do that with a graph. Some nice quotes. How many of you read Harari? He's an interesting writer these days. Sapiens was brilliant, but his new books are really interesting. Homo sapiens is a storytelling animal. We think in stories rather than numbers and graphs. Believe that the universe itself works like a story. The most powerful person in the world is a storyteller, Steve Jobs. The human species thinks in metaphors and learns through stories. Mary Catherine Bateman, you ever heard the quote by Margaret Mead? Never doubt that a small group of committed people can save the world, change the world, it's the only thing that ever has. Yeah. It's a lovely quote. Margaret Mead was her mum. It's a great quote. I don't use it because I don't think we need to change the world. We'll get there. So I went for her daughter instead, but that's a brilliant quote. Eek. Framing is everything. Framing is how we tell a story. Framing is the way we come at it. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, his classic example was that the medical procedure you're about to have has a 90% success rate. Whereas you guys at the back, the medical procedure you're about to have has a 10% mortality rate. Did you feel all right? How do you feel? Eek. Exactly the same thing, obviously. For most people, not all, interestingly, but for most people, framing really does produce a strong emotional response. It can be exactly the same thing, but if you frame it differently, you frame it positively, and the amygdala gets excited, you get happy hormones, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, yay! You frame things negatively, you can push people straight into fight or flight again. Adrenaline, cortisol. These things make a physiological difference to human beings. Something that the conscious brain probably isn't even involved in, but they have a massive impact. Here's one, people and nature thrive. That was WWF's slogan for years. Lots of other people use it. IPBES uses it, still on their main report. What's wrong with that framing? I haven't got time to get into Q&A as a rhetorical question. People and nature, two different things. Yeah, people, nature. They're not the same in that sentence. And when times get hard, that suggests that we've got to make a choice. Are we going to pick people or are we going to pick nature? And nobody is going to pick nature over people if that's the choice they think they have. This framing presents people and nature as two different things, and it doesn't help. And when the times get hard, that happens. Drill, baby, drill. The framing is people thrive. Nature may well have a worldview. A rhino may have a worldview. A rock may have a worldview. We can never see it. We're humans. We can only see through a human lens. And nature is important to us. It may be utilitarian. It may be ecosystem services, fresh water, oxygen, that kind of thing. It may be a love of being out in the forests. But it speaks to us on many, many levels, but it speaks to us. This is a human viewpoint, and for us to thrive, we need nature thriving. That's how we frame it. This is about people thriving, and people can see the value of nature to themselves and their families, then they start protecting it. Somebody earlier said we protect the things we value. Quite right. So we need to value this not as something that we need to look after, a separate thing, but something that's valuable to us. We look after it because it's important to us. If you're scientists in the room, and many of you are, forging the conservation message, the important ecological message is really important. But it's impotent unless you can communicate it. And scientists are not famous at being great communicators. Work with your communication colleagues. We need to get skills. We need to understand this stuff. And there are people who understand this stuff. A lot of them are called marketing departments, but they're great at communicating what they need to communicate. Start working with other people. We need not just to get the conservation message good, but we need to get it out there. So we need to work with others. If you're not a scientist and you're already a great communicator, God bless you. Let's have some optimism, and then we can have a little bit of a discussion. So this is our 7 stories of optimism this week. That picture is up there because partly the lead story with this week was about the Atlantic right whale. And despite the fact that whale populations have been recovering since the almost worldwide moratorium on whaling, which was in 1986, I think, a lot of the populations have picked up. A lot of the great whale populations are now around the 100,000 mark, which is fantastic. Yay, go whales. But not the North Atlantic right whale. That has really been suffering and is, I can't remember what the numbers are, but they're low. But there was news this week that those numbers have turned around and they're starting to pick up. And that's great, because the North Atlantic right whale is brilliant. That is not a North Atlantic right whale. That's a humpback. But whoever was putting our social media position, the thingy this week, couldn't put a... Have you ever seen, there's a National Geographic photo of a whale underwater and a diver in front of it. And the diver is looking at the whale. They're looking at each other. It's the most amazing photo. Anybody seen? I can see a few heads and hands. That's a North Atlantic right whale. They're amazing things. And their numbers are going up. That's this week. Yay! There were 6 other stories, but I like the whale story. So Oxford University was involved in, and so were a lot of other people, in a big meta-analysis last year of as many conservation projects as they could get their hands on. And they found that 2/3 of conservation projects have at least some positive impact. And many of them have a significant impact. Conservation works. I tend to use a mountaineering metaphor because I think of this as a big challenge we have to climb. So, I mean, the climb we have to do is bigger and more complicated than anything we've done before. I said earlier, this is a huge challenge for us as a species. But we're getting quite good at climbing. We're getting better at this. There is real hope here. We talked about the northern white rhino earlier and poor Sudan, who died in March 2018. This is the southern white rhino. Lives in and around South Africa and other countries around there, with a couple of red-billed oxpeckers and glossy starling, I think. Anyway, that's the ornithology for the evening. These guys were thought to be extinct. They were hunted to extinction, we thought, at the end of the 19th century. Colonial hunting just wiped them out. All over southern Africa, there were none left. And then they found a very small population. Numbers vary, but 50 animals, maybe 100, probably less than 100, in KwaZulu-Natal, around the Umvolozi, Shihlui area. There are now, and there's good news and bad news, last year there were 16,000 of them. They are the most numerous rhino population on the planet. Just because people took this fledgling population of these animals that we thought were extinct and really started looking after them. Project Rhino. The zoos got involved and there were captive breeding populations going on. When I grew up, I used to go to Whipsnade Zoo just outside London. It's London Zoo's big country zoo. And there was the Whipsnade and Umvolozi Railway. And it went right through the white rhino enclosure. These days, they're not allowed to take trains through the white rhino enclosure, but they did then. And it was amazing. But you could see these white rhinos from South Africa, all part of the breeding program. And then they started reintroducing them and moving them around to different areas where they used to be safe and they used to thrive, and re-establishing populations. And 50 years later, there were 16,000 white rhinos. This year's figure now has it down at 15,000 white rhinos because of poaching. So there's still pressures, but we went from 50 to 15,000 still. We can do this stuff. It's good. That is a Sumatran rhino. They are small, brown, hairy, and they sing. They live in dense forest and they have to find each other to mate. So they sing. I've heard them. They are amazing. I've never actually seen one. I've heard recordings of them. But that photo was taken by a friend of mine who did go out there and has seen them. The Indonesian rhinos are the Javan rhino and the Sumatran rhino, and there are fewer than 50 of, there are fewer than 50 of each of them left. So they're in real dire straits. But there is an amazing team of people in Indonesia. That's at the Sumatran Rhino Rescue Centre. So these guys have got to the point where we're trying to bring them in from the wild, look after them, and get them to reproduce. And they've only captured, I can't remember how many are in the sanctuary, is it 7, 8 now? But they're learning to look after them, and they're breeding. There have been several successful births now, and which is an amazing thing. With capturing wild animals is one thing, learning to look after them and keep them healthy and breeding, that's not easy. So the fact that these amazing Indonesian guys and their vets and their animal people and local people from the local villages who go out on motorbikes, they come back, they go out and gather fodder for them, and they come back on these motorbikes, and the motorbikes have like a bush on the back. I don't know how they drive them. It just looks like the whole thing's going to fall over, but somehow they bring this enormous quantity of fodder back on a small motorbike. But the effort that's going on to look after these guys is stunning. And you've got amazing Wilhelmus Zoo down in Stuttgart fund a lot of this work. I do a lot of work with zoos. I know different people have different opinions about zoos. Let's not get into that one. But the zoos are in a great place to do conservation work, and a lot of them are doing great conservation work, and Wilhelma are funding a lot of this work. They're doing amazing work. It's just great that there are German zoos. I mean, a lot of the German zoos and other conservation organizations are supporting amazing work around the world. This just happens to be one I know personally, but doing fantastic stuff. Barack Obama used to say that this is the greatest time to be alive. If you had to pick any time in human history to be born, and you didn't know where you were going to be born, in which circumstances, you'd choose now. You've got more chance of surviving now than you ever had. Remember those idiot humans? We were looking at all the graphs earlier and how terrible things are. Let's look at a few more graphs. That's the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty. You can tell that because it says it at the top of the graph. For years, it's been steady. And then the world's population has gone up and up and up, the hockey stick graph. But you'll notice that it's not only the proportion of people living in absolute poverty that's gone down, the actual numbers have gone down. So as the world's population has spiked to 8.2 billion, we've not only decreased the proportion of people living in poverty, we've decreased the numbers. How did we do that? Because that doesn't sound like these idiots who are wrecking the joint and spoiling the whole ecosystem. That sounds like a good thing. That sounds like there was some intelligence in there somewhere. Here's another one. That's global life expectancy. All right, medicine has got better, so it's inevitable to some extent. But that's a heck of a change, and it's worldwide. It's not just Europe and North America and other developed bits. It's worldwide. I know it's not universal, and it's not completely equal, but that's an achievement. This is global child mortality. And this, you could take this graph back centuries, and that figure would say stubbornly the same. About 40% of kids would die before the age of 5 in most countries. That was what used to happen to people. It's now about 4%. Again, the global population has rocketed, and yet child mortality has plummeted. How did we do that if we're so terrible and we're going to wreck the planet? I think we did that because we care about these things. They are simple human things that everybody can care about. This is life expectancy. It's the life of a child. It's people living in poverty. You can look and see people on the TV, and they might look completely different from you, and they might live in a part of the world you don't even recognize, and their clothes and their way of life and everything is different. And yet you can see that they're living in terrible poverty, and you can say those people shouldn't have to live like that. And people do something about it. And we've achieved marvelous things. What we need to do is just add the place we live, looking after the place we live, to that simple list of things that people care about. And it's already getting on that list. I think we look back 100 years, and you can look back, and they were intelligent people 100 years ago, but we look back at some of the things, a lot of people in this room couldn't vote probably 100 years ago. Lots of things have changed. And we look back and we think, how could they have done some of those things? People are going to look back in another 100 years, I think, at us and say, how could they have lived so unsustainably? They knew. How could they do it? It's such a simple, easy human thing. We look after people who live in poverty. We look after the children. We look after the place we live. It's not artificial. It's perfectly natural and human. They will get there. So if we're conservationists today, we're not trying to change the world. We don't have to. The world will catch up. Our job is to be the advance guard, is to try and protect the things that are here now, so that when everybody else has caught up in 50 years, 60 years' time, a couple of generations, those things are still here. But the inspiring thing is, if we do good work today and we protect some of those things, they'll probably be safe, because the world will catch up and people will take over and people will look after them. Our job is to make sure that when those people catch up, those things are still here. But we don't have to change the tide, push back the tide. We don't have to change the world. It will catch up with us. There is hope. Conclusion. The challenge is huge, but we can get there. I hope I've made that case. I'd be interested if you don't think I have. We need large-scale behaviour change, and therefore conservation is primarily a social science. Sorry to break it to you, but it probably is. But that means we all have a great opportunity to make a difference and get involved. We can all influence what's going on in our countries, in our universities, in our businesses. There are many ways that we touch power. We can all make some contribution here. You don't have to have a lab coat. It's a long road, but we will get there. I really think we will, and I'm probably the most cynical of the lot, but I think we'll get there. You're welcome to work with us if you're excited about this stuff. There are other people doing this work as well. Come and talk to us. That's probably more than my hour, but I think we're all right. Thanks very much. Thank you for listening to me. We've still got some time, so if we want to have a bit of a discussion, it would be lovely to talk to some of you people. And over to Nadia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a quite impressive talk, and then you shared a perspective I had never before, so really cool. So I think now it's time for questions. And also, if you don't dare to ask in English, I'm happy to translate. Don't be shy. Come on, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
I trained as a biologist originally, and I did a master's degree. I actually did a master's degree in biological computing, and went on to do a lot of GIS work. When I was doing that, traveling around the world in Africa and Asia, it was as a GIS guy, Geographic Information Systems, computy guy. But then I did another master's degree in social science, environment, policy and society, but it was a social science master's. So I've got 2 master's degrees. I've always been NGO, wanting to be out there doing something, so I didn't do a PhD. Rather wish I had, but life went differently. But I'm a natural scientist and a converted social scientist.
I'm not a scientist. I work in industry, in producing industry, and the word green has become a marketing term. It's
Yeah.
there is a lot of greenwashing happening, for sure, with buying the CO2 certificates and all this stuff. So we cooperate with industry, with companies, firms.
Do we talk? So the question is, how do we work with industry? There's a lot of greenwashing going on these days. Being green has become a commodity. Yeah. Industry can be incredibly powerful. There are great industries out there who are trying to do things better. I think of, we used to use Salesforce at Save the Rhino, the big corporate database. Facebook or Silicon Valley generally used to be move fast and break things. Salesforce turned it around to move fast and fix things. And they support a lot of charities and do a lot of great work. There are a lot of great companies like that. There's a movement now within the corporate sector, and the corporate sector can be immensely powerful, so it's always worth engaging with, that people are looking at corporate citizenship. They're looking at engaging their employees more, who really want to feel that they're doing more than chasing the market. So it's becoming serious. And yes, there's a lot of people in the wake who still see it as a box-ticking exercise or something that goes on the back page of the annual report, CSR. But industry can be incredibly powerful in leading this, and some of them are being. So it's worth working with the really good guys, and that can be really inspiring. And then taking some of that thinking and working as well with the guys who are not so good at the moment. And just perhaps convening, putting the really good guys in touch. I did a workshop on environmental economics 10 years ago. And loads of people were going on about, the balance between economics and environment. And there's a couple of us in there saying there is no balance between environment and economics. This is nonsense. The only choice is between short-term slash and burn exploitation, or if you're in it for the long term, you look after your supply base, you look after your natural materials, and there's no balance there. You just decide which way you want to go. The 2 people saying it, one of them was me, the other one was the guy from Tesco, his massive UK supermarket. I wasn't expecting them to be an ally, but he was brilliant. There are some superb people out there. Yes, we engage with industry all the time, but we have to move it so it's part of the culture and not just another box-ticking exercise. The whole neoconservative, we follow the markets, free market economics of the 1970s, 1980s did a lot of damage. We need to get back to business being a good corporate, a good global citizen, as well as making a good profit. And some of them are great. Yeah, and this is another place that all of us touch power. We're all customers. Tell your favorite company that you're not going to be buying them from them anymore if they're not, don't improve their environmental credentials. And then if they don't, actually do it. But they'll learn.
Thank you very much for this presentation. So you talk about like how communication is important to pass the message and eventually have people taking action. I feel that this information is quite available in a simple way for people who are not scientists, for example. And I feel that the blockage is more that when people have this information, they are confronted between what they want to do and realizing that what they are doing is wrong. And then they get this cognitive dissonance of like, okay, what am I supposed to do, basically? And I think that's what I don't know if you share this view, but I feel that it's also what we need to target, like make people realize that they can do this change, because there is only a few ways you can stop this cognitive dissonance. Either you decide to ignore it or some other strategy. Do you have some thoughts about this?
It comes down to framing, it comes down to understanding values, it comes down to helping people to think through, what do you really care about? But what people want a lot of the time, what I'd like a lot of the time, is to be told that, there's this phrase in English, I'm sure there's a German version, I want to keep my cake and eat it. I want to have both, and you can't. So I want to look after the long-term health of my family, but I also want to go on several intercontinental holidays every year. So part of it is helping people to come to recognize that some of these things are conflicting, and they've got to think through, which one do I want? Typical example in my town, people have massive 4x4s because they have 3 kids, and they say, no, I want this because it will keep my kids safe. And you've got to talk, hang on a minute, it will keep your kids safe if perhaps you're involved in a traffic accident, but you're parking a massive petrol burning or diesel burning 4x4 outside your children's school every day. And so are all your friends. And you start talking to them about air pollution and those kind of things. And then I'm tying myself in knots. It is partly about helping people think through conflicting desires and helping them prioritize. But it is mostly not about telling people off, oh, you can't have this. If you want that, you can't have this. It's about helping people think through the different values and which is that they really want, and understanding how the things that we're telling them are important for them are really important for them. Otherwise, we're making it up.
Test? Okay. I feel like a lot of people would just do some kind of like relativization of like, I do this, but since in this global system, it's such a tiny piece, then I will just continue to do it because, I'm such a part of a fragment of the problem. And I feel that's what is really stopping any progress in the system, because people tend to just do this too much at the end of the day.
But then it's a huge conversation. You're quite right. I completely agree with you. And I don't have an easy answer, because if there was an easy answer to that massive problem, we'd have fixed it by now. But it's a combination of, it's not just individual action. It's easy to think, oh, it's all up to all of us, we can do what we want. There are some things we can do as individuals and something we need to do as a society. So it's talking to the policymakers and the politicians as well as the individuals, so that we can try and get us all acting together. Then if people see that it's not just me doing it, but other people are doing it, then they feel more hopeful and it's actually worth something, and then they're more inclined to do it. It's understanding the value of what you're doing, and to a certain extent, making people feel empowered, so that if I actually do this, I can actually have an impact, because a lot of people feel that. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult. How do I, as a small cog in an enormous machine, make a difference? But the biggest answer, I think, is trying to get that balance between individual action and society action. Because I think that there are some things we can do as individuals, there are some things we need to do as a group. And it tends to swing one or the other rather than both.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for this really great talk. It was a pleasure to listen to you. I really enjoyed it. I have a question about the regional hubs you were talking about. How do they start? Do you go to India and say, okay, this is a good region for a hub, and now we find some people, or how does it work?
We have a lot of people who contact us and say, I'd like to be part of what's going on. And we talk to them about the different ways they can be involved. And some of them are part of our global team. So our social media team is mainly based in Nairobi. And that's purely coincidence. And they're not working in East Africa. There are global social media people. They just happen to be there. Other people are more excited about what I can do in my own country or my own region. And we may have people there already, and we'll put them in touch. We just had a young guy contacted us, is in Australia now. And I'd really like to be the Australian bit of conservation optimism. Can I get started? And yeah, we've been working with him, and what can he do? And so a lot of people reach out to us, but we don't appoint people. It's voluntary, and it's building community, and then what do people want to do? The fact that we've got this really active hub in Pakistan at the moment is just because there's a great bunch of people all working together in Pakistan. I can claim no credit whatsoever. They're just amazing. It's not only dynamic now, but it's dynamic. It's dynamic through time. You get a particular group, and they're wonderful for a few years. They're all students or recent students, but then they start having families, and they got full-time jobs, and they may be able to stay active, but they may get pulled away, and then you may get another generation comes through, or the big activity may shift somewhere else. So it really is it's trying to conduct a little orchestra, but they're all playing their own instruments, and half of them are playing their own tune, and they're amazing people, so it's an absolute privilege, but it tends to organize itself.
So, one last question. I actually wanted to ask the last question, but okay. No, you do it.
Yeah, my question is about sometimes or many times I feel like people think that it's more about acting less badly and not about actually improving things, you know what I mean? So and I think this is kind of a bad source of motivation if it's just like, yeah, your usual way of behavior is just bad and do less of it. And I feel like, yeah, it's hard to actually see an improvement, not like, yeah, you're emitting less CO2 or something, but about like, yeah, you're actually improving nature. You're not making it less bad, but you're making it better. How do you think we can deal with this?
We talked about the use of the language of crisis and emergency and the impact that it has on people. We could have had a really good conversation about the use of language of guilt. And we didn't have time. I didn't include that on the list. But it's another way that people try to get other people to change their behavior. And it's similar to what you were saying. We castigate people. You're bad. You must not do this. And again, it has a negative impact. It's a negative framing. It puts people defensive very quickly, and it just doesn't work. So we need to, again, but it comes back to communication skills, and it comes back to framing. And it comes back to a positive vision of we can make something that's better for all of us, and we can do it in this way. The values thing comes in really easily as well. I mean, quick example that comes back to the business. There's a difference between meeting people where they are, which is really important, but also recognizing that sometimes you want to take them on a journey. So, for example, if you're talking to a business audience and you want a quick win, you just want to get in there and get them to do something, then talk to them about language they understand. Talk to them about economics. Talk to them about how this feeds into their business, and talk their language, which is great if you want that quick win. But by doing that, you're also reinforcing those values. If you want them to go on a longer journey and you actually want them to start thinking more, not about the business side of things, but up to those other values of universalism and social justice and peace with harmony with nature, those kind of things, then you need to not be talking that language, because you're just going to cement the business language, and you're going to start remembering that these people are also people who go out cycling in the forest at the weekend on their carbon fiber, very expensive bicycles that I would really like, but I can't afford. you know, they take their families out into the countryside, and you start reminding them that they're, as well as being business people, they're also family people, and those people care maybe about these values more than the business part does. You can talk to, it's an example of how to use values, but we can talk to any audience and we can say, right, where are we now? Where do we need to be? And what is it that's keeping us here? And we don't, using guilt, you shouldn't be there, you should be somewhere else, is just going to get people to dig in. But indicating that this is not a great place, and that place is actually better, and there's a way of getting there, give people a route, that's the way forward.
Thanks.
Okay, I am afraid we are more or less at the end of the event, but before you give it up for Jon, I have to ask my question, but maybe we can do it one sentence only. So
here's a really complex question.
Yes.
Answer it instantly. Yes.
No, it's a bit tricky, maybe.
Go.
What's your best remedy against ecological grief?
Hope.
See? That
Real
went
hope.
fast.
Real positive hope.
Okay, thank you so much. Give it up.
Thank you.
Okay, before you leave the room, I was excited about this evening too, so I forgot actually what I've written down, and I have to announce it now. So, this was recorded. I hope you all agree. And lastly, we have 2 further lectures in the series. On the 27th of November, Hannah Emde will visit us. She's a Terra X moderator and vet and conservationist. Thank you, Madita. And on the 5th of February, Carolina Soto Navarro will talk about rewilding Europe. And also I want to thank Madita because she organized a lot. And thank you to Jon again for this, inspiring talk. Have a good evening.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you.